Today, I share my experience of losing my mother to cancer on March 29th, 2007, and my trials of going through the 5 stages of grief with two goals in mind. First, to provide comfort to those that are going through a similar situation of grieving and to those that have also gone through the grieving process in the past and are looking for a little bit of guidance. And second, to educate on the 5 stages of grief and provide a little bit of light on kind of how long it takes that can be misconstrued. So with that in mind, this is my story. I awoke to the sound of my father in a panic yelling, "Call 911." Ironically, my aunt, who was staying with us at the time because she was visiting us on vacation, picked up her cell phone and instantly called an ambulance. I had no idea what was going on, but I understood it could not be good as my mother had cancer and I was very aware of that. So it really could probably only mean one thing. I thought to myself in that moment, holy shit, what is going on? As the doctor literally said a few days earlier, the cancer was in remission. My father then again yelled, this time directed at me, to keep my sister in her room. My mind started racing, not knowing what was going on, what to expect. And as a 13-year-old, you go places. So I did what my father said and just told my sister to stay in her room, cover her ears, and lock the door. I was, however, filled with intrigue and wanted to know what was going on. So I walked over to the stairs and peeked down to see what was afoot. Then I heard the blaring of sirens coming down the street as the ambulance was barreling down the road at full speed. I could barely make out what was going on downstairs from my little perch that I was observing from upstairs. And then I see it. The paramedics wheeling out my mother, unconscious, covered in blood. Still to this day, that is the single greatest horror I've ever seen. And as a child, I never thought I would stare death directly in the face. I knew what I saw, but I did not want to accept it as I thought the doctors could pull a miracle out of thin air. And with that, my dad wanted to try and provide some normalcy back into our lives that morning. So he just told my aunt to get us prepared for school. Like nothing ever happened. And as we were preparing to leave, my dad pulled into the driveway, walked into the door, and sat us down. Funny, I already knew what he was going to say as it was already written all over his face. He had the saddest look I've ever seen in my life. It was a man who was just completely defeated, like just complete loss. And then he told us, your mother's gone and she's not coming back. In that moment, I felt like my heart got ripped out of my chest and literally crushed in front of my eyes. And I had no power to do anything about it. No, this could not be happening. The doctor literally said that she was going to be fine. The cancer was in remission. As I paced around my room, I kept repeating to myself, our argument cannot be it. That cannot be the last memory I have of her. For some context, I got into a pretty heated argument with my mother the night before about watching a movie. I literally got into an argument with her about watching a movie. I wanted to play video games, specifically Call of Duty, with some of my friends, and man, did that feel like the biggest regret of my life. I locked myself in that room and just sat there questioning everything as I thought she was going to miraculously heal and just, walk through the door, that it was all just a big lie, that she didn't pass away, and that we were just going to be normal family again. Sometimes life throws a wrench into the cogs just to shake things up completely out of your control. I felt small, like nothing I did mattered. Like the world broke me as I could not get her out of my mind. I literally saw her smiling face over and over and over again, and then cutting to the scene of her covered in blood. It was on an infinite loop playing in my mind, not letting me rest as it forced me to see the truth of what had occurred. I did not and could not accept her passing, as I never got the chance to apologize for my stupid attitude that night. I stayed in my room for the rest of the day, questioning this meaningless world. The next morning, my dad asked me to join him in going to the mortuary to make her funeral arrangements. Ironically, he let me take part in the entire process, making quite a few of the decisions. I don't really know why. I can only speculate it was to come to terms with her death and understand she was not coming back. And when we returned home, it finally set in. Mom's dead and she wasn't coming back. And in that moment, I cursed God and the entire world and all of the existence I inhabited. Looking back now, I honestly saw a monster created inside of me, full of bitterness and hate and malice as I loathed the world for taking my mother. A lot of this anger was rooted in pain and the unfairness I saw in the world. I despised the oncologist that informed us that the cancer was in remission to the point that I honestly thought all doctors were shills who had no ability to heal people. Another part of my anger was directed towards God, asking questions like, why did you take her? Why did you do this to a good person? Why did you do this to us? With all these questions rummaging around in my head, I completely rejected the notion of God and could not comprehend how an all-loving entity could do this to us. This bled into my faith, as at that moment I lost complete trust in God and completely rejected him. I understand today part of that was coping, but I also understand God did a great service by releasing my mother from her illness and allowing her to join him. But the most anger I felt was towards myself, as I deeply regretted the argument we had the night before and carried that guilt everywhere, with animosity towards myself and in my heart for such a petty thing. Now I understand she had already forgave me that night, as she would not have held remorse in her heart, especially against her children. The anger never really subsided, just transformed and sat on the back burner as I tried to bargain with the Lord to get her back. After my fits of rage and cursing God, I tried a new tactic. I prostrated myself before my bed, head down, hands clasped, and began to pray. I did not know if my prayers were reaching anyone, but I tried all the same. I asked what ifs like, what if I quit arguing with people? What if I devoted my entire life to you, Lord, forgoing everything? But the biggest bargain I made was offering up my life for hers, as I believe she was a saint. And I meant that with every fiber of my being. But now, looking back on it, I know she would have been incredibly sad hearing those words come from my mouth, as there was no universe in which she would have me trade my life for hers. After the prayers did not work, I felt like no one was listening, like God had abandoned me, and just fueled my anger at him further. Tried telling a 13-year-old that went to church every Sunday that their prayers did not necessarily work like that. I do believe miracles happen, but the dead are gone. And after that, the funeral occurred, and my heart sunk into a deep sadness, affecting my perceptions of the world. This threw me into over a decade-long battle with depression. And I did not only suffer from severe depression, but had terrible anxiety and honestly resentment towards the world at large. I completely closed myself off from people. And this resulted in deep rooted trust issues and abandonment issues that honestly I thought people were going to abandon me just like my mother did in the middle of the night. And this did not bode well for my friendships as I never allowed people to get to know the real me. It got to the point where I contemplated suicide on multiple occasions and made one attempt as I could not find a reason to keep living. I had completely closed myself off to the world as I never wanted to feel that pain again. I could not see the bright side of anything, and instead of being a kid and taking advantage of its freedoms and just living life, I drowned myself in activities and schoolwork to forget. It did not work to the extent I wanted to, but it did free me from having to address the emotions and insecurities bottled up inside. And still carrying the burdens of my mother's death, I went to college. Fast forward to my final year in school, and I am contemplating taking a large dose of LSD with my friends. And let me be clear, in no way do I condone the use of substances, but I have seen research, specifically that's come out of India, that has seen the effects of ketamine and LSD for curing depression and anxiety. Now, I do encourage you, though, to do your own research. And with that, I want to share my experience with you about my use of the substance and the effect it had on me. So somehow we ended up getting our hands on quite a bit of high quality LSD and decided to drop as a group. And for context, me and my four closest friends at the time decided to do this together as a bonding experience, but also as a journey into the psyche. 4 tabs and an hour later, and I was wondering if it was going to kick in. And boy, did it. We were gone, ladies and gentlemen, into my inner mind and all the splendor and horror it had to offer. Horror, you may be wondering, well, yes, horror, or at least what I believe to be horror. Ironically, I've heard that there's no such thing as a bad trip, just what you need to experience in that moment. And where did it take me? Well, of course, to the moment of my mother's death, reliving every thought and emotion that I had in that moment. However, I got to simultaneously experience it from the perspective of my younger self and from that of a third-party observer. And boy, did it play out differently than I remembered. It's like my mother came from beyond the veil to address me directly and forgive me in that moment and in the current one. I could feel a warm, loving energy wrapping around me, telling me everything is as it should be. It was the sadness and anger I was carrying from my mother's passing finally melting away. The rock lifted off my shoulders, and I could finally breathe again. I recall tears filling my eyes, not of sadness, but of gratefulness for the pain that was finally leaving my form. I remember my closest friend at the time said it was like watching a dark, dense energy clear into a blinding light. I accepted that she was physically gone, but I knew she lived on within me. My heart, which was shattered, was finally pieced back together and given to me. I was free. Let me be clear. Again, this was my experience with hallucinogenics, and I do not condone or promote the use of them. I am just sharing and informing you how they helped me heal a decade-old wound. Now, let me be clear, as the stages of grief are not linear, and you can hop back and forth between them, regress back into old ones, and skip some entirely. Additionally, there is no time frame for each stage, as it can vary from person to person. Like in my case, it can take over a decade to get over a loss. For some of you, it might take sixth month. For some of you, it might take 6 years. And will it ever be the same? No. is I will never be able to see her physically again, and the loss is still present. But now I look at it from a different perspective. I still carry scars in my heart from the healing process, but I ultimately know it has made me stronger. To grieve deeply is to have loved fully. Hearing those words recently rung true, as most who go through a significant grieving process had unconditional love for the person. And this transcends just grieving people, as you can grieve many things. I loved my mother with all of my heart and every fiber of my existence, and I grieved her to the fullest extent I could. And in the words of Laofi, I have decided to open my heart to the world, as there are infinite reasons to keep living in it. And yes, there will be more grief and pain, but that is what it means to love. Well, thanks for tuning into today's video. I honestly appreciate everybody that hops on and views this content. If you liked it, I would love for you to hit that like button. And if you're looking forward to future content or just want to help the channel grow, I wouldn't mind if you hit that subscribe button. Every subscriber, every viewer, I truly appreciate you coming on and joining us with this content and this journey. Otherwise, that notification bell will let you know when I post content in the future. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a great week, and God bless.